However dark the world may seem, we have the light of faith at our command, and it is ours to do with as we will. For faith is a brave look at the soul for new paths to life. It is not dogma, it is the white fire of enthusiasm. In its higher forms, faith is the kindler of all nobility. What we call security is mostly superstition. It does not exist anywhere in nature, nor does humanity as a whole experience it. Life is either a daring adventure, or it is nothing. To keep our faces towards the change and behave like free spirits in the presence of faith is strength undefeatable. Helen Keller. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, you can do better. It's a lovely sunny day. Good morning, everyone. That's what I like to hear. Good, good, good. It is good to have you all here. I'm Reverend Hank Purse. I am the interim minister here at First Parish, and I am so pleased to have all of you here on this lovely day. And it is, it is just great. I get here very early in the morning when it's still dark, so I'm always amazed to look out and go, oh, the sun has come out after I've unglued myself from my screen and everything else. So it is great that you are all here on this lovely day. And may I introduce Jenny Mulqueen, who's going to give us our announcements and our welcoming.
Welcome to First Parish Milton. My name is Jenny Mulqueen, and I'm a member of the worship committee. First Parish is a vibrant, welcoming congregation that welcomes all people to grow deep faith and take bold action. We're so glad that you're here with us today. This sanctuary is made holy by your presence. If you are joining us for the first time, you can take a welcome packet from the pew rack. There's information about our services and our childcare. If you fill out the yellow card inside the packet, I'm so glad you're back. We had some bell ringers who disappeared. Please fill out the yellow card inside the packet and drop it in the offering plate. You'll receive our weekly email newsletter, which can help you to get to know us better. We have greeters and myself. Please join us after the service to walk over for our social hour. We can answer any questions you have to the best of our ability. We strive to make our worship experience accessible to people of all ages and abilities. Please see the welcome card again for more information on this, or speak with an usher at the back of the church. I do have one quick announcement by Chris Clifford this morning. But the work of living our faith is done both in and out of worship. So there are more announcements, like about the Halloween party, etc., in your order of worship.
Thank you. I'll only take a minute of time. Buried at the very top of the announcements, you'll see save the date, November 15th. We're holding our first fundraiser auction. We really need people to come. If you got your Evite, if you could please respond, that would be fantastic. We're also still looking for donations. Steel and Rye has donated a gift card. Esprit Divine has given a basket. We have a number of services. A number of people have been kind enough to offer up the vacation homes. So it's going to be a fabulous event. Please come and join us, if for nothing else, to be in community. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So, lastly, but this is very important, I want to tell you something. You belong here. You belong here. Maybe just for the next hour, though we hope for much longer. You belong here, and we are truly happy to have you with us. Extending a generous welcome is a spiritual practice, and I invite us all to extend that welcome to our neighbors by taking a few minutes to greet them warmly. Now I'd like to invite Tucker and Anderson up to light our chalice.
These are the words for our chalice lighting. We light this beacon of hope sign of our quest for truth and meaning and celebration of the life that we share together. Thanks, guys.
And let us read and say the call to worship together. Come, let us gather. We gather to celebrate the sacred within and among us. We come to seek spiritual growth and understanding. We strive to practice acceptance, forgiveness, and love.
Together we work to build a world of justice and compassion. Come, let us gather together. I have a story this morning for it is a time for all ages, so it is a story for all of you. It is a very old story from the Jewish tradition, and it tells of a king who was not Jewish. And in times long ago, in times of kings often like to do things like dress up as one of the poor people and go out into the city. This is one of the reasons why we don't have kings anymore. We don't like that sort of trickery, but this is what this king did. He dressed up as a poor person, and he went out walking through the worst parts of his kingdom. He wanted to see what was going on. And in the midst of the worst neighborhood he could find, he heard someone singing and praising God, and he's like, who is this nut? Who is singing in this? I'm in the worst neighborhood in my kingdom, and here is this person who seems so happy. And he wandered and he followed that voice, and he found this older Jewish man who was there singing with his family and eating some food. And the king, who was of course dressed as a beggar, knocked at the door and said, "Hi, I heard you singing. Why are you so happy?" And this is what the older man said. I don't make a lot of money. I fix shoes for a living. But God blesses me day by day, and I know He will provide for me. And the king said, "That's very interesting. Thank you very much." And he leaves, and he goes back and he thinks, "I'm going to test to see how happy this man really is." So he got back to his kingdom, got back to his castle, and he made a law. No more cobblers, no more shoe fixers, no more shoe repairmen. Exactly. Uh-oh is right. And so the next day, the king once again gets dressed up, puts on his costume, and went back out to that same neighborhood. And once again, he heard the man singing. He said, "How could this be? I banned all shoe repairmen." And he went and he knocked on the door and he said, "Hi, it's me again, this strange traveling poor person. And I hear you singing again, though I heard that the king had banned people from fixing shoes. How are you able to survive?" And the poor man said, "Oh, I know that God will provide for me and bless me day by day. So although I cannot fix shoes, I've decided to sell wood. I go out into the woods, I cut down some branches, and I bring them in, and I've sold them, and I make just enough to provide for my family and I." And the king said, "How very interesting, that's great." And he leaves, and on his way back to his castle, he thinks, "I'm going to test him again." And he makes another decree: no more wood sellers. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make it really hard. All of the woodcutters have to show up at the castle tomorrow morning, for they're going to be drafted into my army. And so the next morning he goes out, dressed up, of course, as the king, and there is the man, the poor man, and he's there, and he has been drafted, and he's been given a suit of armor and a sword, and he is scared, and he doesn't know what to do. And the king thinks, "I've got him now. How can he be happy?" And they dismiss these new soldiers. They say, "Show up here tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning." in all your armor. And the poor man heads out. And he goes, how can I can't fix shoes. I can't cut down trees and sell them. How am I going to make enough money to feed my family tonight? The only thing he could think of was he looked at his new uniform and he looked at that sword and he thought, perhaps I could sell this sword. So what I'll do, I will sell the sword I have here. So he went and he sold the sword. He kept the handle, but instead of the fun sword, and stuck it back in there. And that night, the king, once again dressed up, shows up and says, you are once again singing and happy, and you have food for your family. What has happened? And so the poor man tells the king, well, I sold the sword. I've replaced it with the one of wood. And the king goes, oh, great. So the next morning, he shows up again with all the other new soldiers. And the king says, I'm glad that you are here this morning because there is an execution that's going to happen. And the person who's going to be the executioner is this man right here, this new soldier. He's going to be the executioner. Because the king knows that his sword is not made of steel. His sword is made of wood. And everyone in town has come in because they were all forced to come in and to see this execution. And the man is scared. And he says, oh, may I have a few moments? May I have a few moments to pray before this moment? And the king says, sure. The king wants to see what's going to happen. And he says, and the poor man who had been a cobbler and a woodcutter and is now a soldier, he says out loud, he says, God, you know I've never taken a life before. And if this man is guilty, may my sword strike him dead with one blow. Yet if this man is innocent, may the sword at my side be turned to wood. And he pulled out his sword, and the crowd was amazed and cheered. And the two people who were the happiest, of course, was the man with the sword and the man who was going to be executed. Everyone goes free, hooray! The king is so greatly impressed that he releases the man who is to be executed. And he says to the poor man, you will come and be with me, be an advisor to me. And it is said that for years afterwards, if you could go by that castle, you would hear the two of them singing and laughing and praising God. This week, my young children, as you head out to your classes, as you head off to your school, think of the regular miracles that happen, the things that people think are amazing that you can do. That you can do to impress others, that you can do by being a good person and following that small, still voice within. At this point, as our young people head off to their classes, I'm going to ask the rest of you to turn to the words in your orders of service, and we're going to sing our young folks off to their classes. One of this committee, this church, like most churches, has a whole lot of committees which help run this place, which make sure that this place works. Today alone, the parish committee, the board of the church is meeting, the music committee is meeting, and then this evening the religious education committee is meeting. Meetings go on at this place all the time, but committees that you know mostly what they do. At this moment, I'm going to introduce you to some folks who you know, who most of you, if you've been here, you know these folks, but you may not know what exactly they do. They are the transition team. They are the team that works with me during this transition period, during these 2 years while your church will be in search for a new minister. They are a team of folks who have been selected because they know you and you know them. They are here to help us all, to help me get to know you better, to help me to help you get to know me better, to help me to get to know you better, to help smooth things out when I do things wrong, to help explain things about what's going on and what's going to happen. With that said, you see their names here written in your order of service, and you may look around and say, hey, there's only 2 of them here today. That's true, but they are so powerful. These 2 folks are so powerful that they will fill in. And at this point, can I invite Patricia and Gillian to come on up, and I'm going to let Gillian finish explaining exactly what the transition team does. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Gillian Najarian, and together with Patricia Ostrom, we are 2/5 of the rest of the committee. And not here today are Brian Kelly, Jen Leggett, and Ian Torney. And what do we do? So our purpose is to support both the congregation and the interim minister through the 2-year transition to our next settled minister. So how will we do that? We will serve as advisors to the interim minister, helping him settle in and get to know the congregation, both as individuals as well as a whole, and to be extra sets of eyes and ears for him as we go through this transition over the next 2 years together. We will serve as ambassadors to the congregation, helping them understand the process of transition as set by the UUA, as well as the specific First Parish plan for the 2-year transition period as set by the Parish Committee. And we will serve as ambassadors for the congregation, being a liaison to both the minister and the Parish Committee with suggestions, thoughts, and concerns about the transition.
We have been affectionately dubbed Hank's handlers. And we are here to help him help us. Although we accept our role as a two-way facilitative bridge between you, the congregation, and Hank, this committee should in no way serve as a barrier for communication between you and him. In fact, Hank is very eager to connect with people and to get to know them personally. So to that end, we will be organizing over the next several months opportunities for people to hang out with Hank. There's a lot of alliteration in the H's here. The first one is right around the corner. It will be this Friday night at the Halloween party. I know this is primarily for kids, but during the time when the teenagers are working or playing with the children, all the adults will be invited to go into the parlor and have a little chat with Hank, getting to know him better. The following week, Wednesday the 29th, we will be hosting a lunch for those of you who are in town or close by and have free time during the middle of the day, 12:30 to 1:30. We'll have soup and conversation and another opportunity to get to know Hank. Other hangouts with Hank are in the works, and we encourage you all to take advantage of these moments to get to know him and to let him get to know us. Thank you.
And now if you could turn to the responsive reading number 569 in your gray hymnal. Reading the italicized response. Stand by this faith, work for it, and sacrifice for it.
There is nothing in all the world so important as to be willing to this faith, which is placed before us loftiest ideals.
Which has comforted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful.
Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great task.
That you are strong enough to work for a great, true principle without counting the cost.
Go on finding every new
The first time I ever came to this church, it was as a neutral pulpit. I was auditioning, if you like to think of it like that, for the position of the settled minister of the church in Medford, and I was so nervous. I'd been working as an interim minister up in Maine, and here was a chance for me to come back down to Boston. I'd already spent the weekend with the search committee, but here I was. And I was here, and I was out in this little space right out here, this little waiting area out here, and I was so nervous. And I was just doing some like little calisthenics, some stretching things, some facial things to make sure my that I wouldn't slur my words, that I wouldn't speak too quickly. And I'm there, and I'm so focused on this. And then Emma Jean, your former music director, I remember all of a sudden she appeared and she said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, oh, and I told her, and and I can't remember what I said or what she said. I remember that whatever it was, that she was very sort of like, oh, of course, that makes sense. She was very like calming to me. I remember that feeling. Do you remember the first time you ever came to this church? I'm trying to remember that day. Do you remember why you came? Now, maybe some of you came as children. I remember what that was like. But if you came as an adult on that first Sunday, were you at least a little nervous? Afraid that someone might come up and say, "What are you doing?" Perhaps you were afraid that you would be asked to stand up and identify yourself. Or perhaps you were afraid that no one would speak to you. Afraid that there would be there'd be no room in this place for a person like you. Or perhaps you were afraid that you would immediately be asked to be a part of a committee. Yet for some reason you stayed. Maybe you already had friends here. Maybe you loved the music or the preaching or the silence or just an hour without the kids. And then you came back the following Sunday. And well, today you are here. I wonder what that was, that thing that made you stay, that attracted you to this place, and that when you came here you found it. Or you came here for a different reason and you found that you stayed for another. I wonder what that substance was, that stuff in the water. And let me also acknowledge that perhaps this is your first Sunday here, and that somehow I've nailed that experience that you're having, described your experiencing, the stuff that you are experiencing perfectly. Or that this is your first Sunday here and I've completely gotten it all wrong as to why you come. Well, welcome to this place where the minister admits that he doesn't always get it right. You see, as the interim minister, I'm still trying to figure things out. Figure out who you are, how I am going to work with you. It is one of the things that I love about interim ministry, is sort of coming into a new place and finding my place in it, finding out who the people are that I'll be working with these next 2 years. In some ways, I'm really good at it. Having grown up as a Unitarian Universalist, I understand how our faith works, especially here in New England. I understand how our churches are, how we are with each other. And yet I also make mistakes, which is also, I think, perhaps part of the interim's job, is to make mistakes and have people go, oh, that's not what we expected at all. But I'm here to perform a few tasks. I told you about these tasks early on last month, and I'm going to remind you of them again and again. I'm going to remind you of them right now. Besides preaching and teaching and being here for you Sunday after Sunday, week after week, I also have some tasks. The first is to help you come to terms with your history. to grieve if it's appropriate, to help folks work out their emotions, to understand the history of the leadership of this church. Take an unvarnished look at its past, its strengths, its weaknesses, its accomplishments, to hold a mirror up to you and say, is this who you are? The second is to help you explore your identity and to help to identify the direction that you want this church to go in. I'm also here to help you make leadership changes, operational changes if they are needed. We will plant new seeds. We will nourish the roots of this community of faith. Then my job is to help you renew the links that you have. Make sure we are bringing everyone along and fulfilling our mission and our commitments to people outside of these four walls. And the last of these 5 tasks is to help the church commit to a new direction in its ministry. Now, last month, on the cover of the order of service, each week we had 2 quotes. The first quote was from Shakespeare. What's past is prologue. The second quote came from Joe Strummer, and it was that the future is unwritten. And as much as I believe in these statements, I want to add this, that what is past is prologue, and yet the history of this church prepares us for the opportunities that lie before us. The history of this church prepares us for the opportunities that lie before us. When you first came to this church, when you first came here, you may not have realized it, but you were starting a new page in your life. And maybe also in the life of this church. And as your interim minister, one of the things I get to do is to think about the future of a church. Think about the future of the larger faith of which we are a part of. It's fun. It's fun to think about the future of the church even though I will not be there with you. But I look around at the people who are here, your resources, the larger community, and I get to dream with you about what this church wants to be. But dreaming about the future is difficult because I don't know the future. I didn't take that class. And our Unitarian Universalist faith is a faith which changes fairly quickly, at least in the world of religious organizations. But do you ever think about where this church will be in 50 years? You might think about where this church was 50 years ago. You might go and see some of the older photos of this church that we've sort of uncovered. I've posted a bunch of those on Facebook. There's a picture of a party going on in the parish hall, and everyone is dressed up, including all the teenagers. It is the most amazing pictures, and the paintings that are in there are still on there. And some of us think that the curtains that are up there now are still the same curtains from 50 years ago. But do you ever think about what this church will be like in 50 years? Who will be filling these pews? Who will be running this church? Who will be in leadership? Do you wonder, as I sometimes do, about what our larger Unitarian Universalism will be like in 50 years? What will our association of congregations be like? Will it even be? I don't need to tell you that the religious landscape of America is changing. Many churches are losing members. A number of churches are closing. People aren't attending. Yet people still believe in something. And people also need the things that a religious community can provide. They want to be known and to know other people. They want to be taken care of and have the opportunity to take care of other people. The Christian theologian Phyllis Tickle, whose name I remember because it's Phyllis Tickle, a few years ago in a book she wrote, talked about this idea that every 500 years in Western religious thought there is a great upheaval. It goes from the Babylonian exile to the schism between the Eastern and Western church, to the invasion of Rome, to the Protestant Reformation. Protestant Reformation, which started in 1517. Almost 500 years ago. Here we are at this time. And every time there was one of these great upheavals, things started to change before that event. And then there was an event, something happened, and then there was more upheaval. But then, in that upheaval, the religious traditions and expressions change. And often the church, with a capital C, the church changes. It splits in two. And yet what remains ends up being stronger. One of the ideas that Phyllis Tickle puts forward is she draws a diagram, and she says there are four various parts in the larger Christian tradition. She says there's the liturgical church, whether that's Roman Catholic or Episcopal or even Lutheran. Then there's the evangelical part. There's the apostolic tradition, that is the folks who are faith healers, who speak in tongues. And then there's the last group, whom she refers to as the social justice Christians, and who, even though we as individuals and as a denomination may think of ourselves as being much more sort of post-Christian than a Christian denomination, that's our family heritage, as being part of that social justice Christians. And she has this drawn up in this quadrants, these four quadrants. And she says in the future, she imagines that there's a great swirling of traditions and experiences that occur. Let me just say, I grew up in a Unitarian Universalist church where there was no chalice. I remember when the minister brought in the chalice to the New Bedford Unitarian Church, and I remember hearing grown-ups say, lighting a candle in church, it's okay if we come in and there are candles lit, but we're actually going to light it in church. Are we Catholic? And yet, there is probably no Unitarian Universalist church that does not have a chalice with a flame in it. The religious traditions that people who would consider themselves Protestants 50 years ago would not have dreamed of having an Advent calendar, of talking about Lent, or even, my gosh, taking part in an Ash Wednesday service. And yet I see it all the time. Presbyterians and Congregationalists walking around on that Wednesday and the weeks before Easter with a smudge of ashes on their forehead. And I loved to, just after reading that chapter about the merging and the mingling of all these different religious traditions that Phyllis Tickle talks about. I, of course, as a Unitarian Universalist, thought, yes, and then we could have a part with Buddhism and the earth-centered spiritualities and religious humanism. And how would we mix those traditions up in there as well? Because I want a faith that is one for all people, which is open to the wisdom and the teachings in all ages from all traditions, that honors reason and the search for religious truth. That's what I want. That's what I think might be happening in 50 years in this church and in other churches in our liberal tradition. A few years back, I was at the ordination of Reverend Jason Leiden. Jason is one of the most radical ministers that I've ever met. He is someone who, I will be thinking of myself. I'll be thinking of myself. I'm pretty liberal. I'm pretty progressive. And then I meet with Jason, and I realize, and I'm like, hey, did you go to that protest or did you sign that petition? He's like, we've got to dismantle the prison system. And all of a sudden I realize I'm not nearly as radical as I think I am. At his ordination, a fellow Unitarian Universalist minister, Ian Whitemauer, wrote this, welcoming Jason, who understands himself and expresses himself as an anarchist, a political anarchist as well. Ian welcomed this anarchist into our institution. That Jason, you are now part of the institution. As horrific as that may sound to you, you've worked hard to earn this mantle. It is time for you to assume all of the responsibilities that go with it. We welcome you. Indeed, you are needed. We are the inheritors of the anti-institutionalist strain of Unitarian Universalism, which traces our rebellion back to Emerson's Divinity School address, perhaps even earlier, which says the church isn't necessary. All you need to appreciate is the snowstorm that rages outside the window. But that's not true. The church is necessary. Institutions provide opportunities as much as they negate opportunity. For you and I, and for many people who have gathered here to celebrate with you, this question that we wrestle with is who will control the institution? As I listened to Ian's charge, that's what that was called in the service, as I listened to Ian's charge to Jason, I thought about that part of what he said about how most Unitarian Universalists tend to be nonconformists. And Jason very much so. But how often we have to acknowledge that part of ourselves that we find challenging. So when we join with others, it can be difficult at times to find a common theme which binds us together. We come out of many different rooms, out of many different religious traditions, out of no religious tradition, and we come here and we hope to find something that's going to make us stick. So let me put forward the idea that the theme, the thing that we can all agree on, is about transformation. See, I want a faith that is exciting and that makes a difference in our community and makes a difference in your lives. And not just small differences, but big differences. I want the way you see the world to be changed, to be transformed. And do you know why? Because you aren't there yet. Wherever it is you are going with your life, you aren't there yet. You aren't kind enough, you aren't happy enough, you aren't the person you want to be yet, and neither am I. But who else is going to challenge you? Will it be your boss or your spouse? Somebody online? Maybe, but maybe the changes that they want they want them just because they will benefit them. Not that that's bad, but I know you want more for your life. I've heard some of your stories, and I want to hear more about what you are doing to get through that difficult time in your life, or what you did. And I want us to be able to help you. People are here not to support the church, but the church is here to support the people. The late Reverend A. Powell Davies, who was minister of the All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in Washington, D.C., once wrote these words. Do you belong to a religion that says humankind is not divided except by ignorance and prejudice and hate? The religion that sees humankind as naturally one and waiting to be spiritually united? The religion that proclaims an end to all exclusions and declares a brotherhood and sisterhood unbounded. The religion that knows we shall never find the fullness of the wonder and the glory of life until we are ready to share it. That we shall never have hearts big enough for the love of God until we have made them big enough for the worldwide love of one another. As you have listened to me, he wrote, have you thought perchance that this is your religion? If so, do not congratulate yourself. Stop long enough to recollect the miseries of the world in which you live, the fearful cruelties, the hate, the bitter prejudices, the need of such a world for such a faith. And if you can say that this of which I have spoken is your faith, then ask yourself this question. What are you doing with your faith for yourself and for others? We want congregations. We want a church that is spiritually deep and strong and that endures and can help relationships flourish, that is engaged in communities as sources of moral vision and effective action. We want our religious homes to be truly multi-generational and multi-racial places that reflect the diversity of the wider world of which we are a part. Ours is a message that can appeal to all people, regardless of their backgrounds. And we need to improve our ability to share that with others and to believe it ourselves. When we think about the future of our faith, think about the future of this church, we need to think about the wisdom and have opportunities to reflect from having a liberal faith that isn't guided by the media or the politics of our times, but which we are aware of, though. And as your interim minister, my job is to remind you of all the important things that are found here, of the friendships that you have, the people you share these pews with week after week, of the opportunities to be transformed and to in turn transform the world around you. I also get to say, stick around. Stick around in this place. It is good for you to be in this church. It is good for you. It is good for your health. It is good for you spiritually. You look people who go to church are better looking than people who don't go to church. I don't know if that's true, but I'm telling you that right now. I have faith that what has made this community so vital throughout its history, that substance is still here. That substance, whatever that is, has made you feel at home here. It's helped you to stay here. And it needs you to be part of it. The responsive reading that we shared this morning, those were words written by Reverend Olympia Brown, the first woman ever ordained in the Universalist faith in the 19th century. And those were words that she wrote in her final sermon. Stand by this faith. Work for it, sacrifice for it. There's nothing in all the world so important as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before us the loftiest ideals, which has comforted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great message, that you are strong enough to work for a great true principle without cutting the cost. Go on finding ever new applications of these truths and new enjoyments in their contemplation, always trusting in the one God which ever lives and loves. Amen. We are going to sing, let's see, our next hymn is number 132. This hymn was written by the Reverend Hosea Ballou II. He was the first president of Tufts University, and yesterday was his birthday. Let's just sing the first and third verses of Bright Those Jewels. No need to stand up, just remain seated. 132, Bright Those Jewels. Our hearts in prayer. Infinite lover of beauty, who has breathed into us your creative powers, we thank you for all the magic in our human lives, often turning our drabness into gold. We are grateful for all the paths that have led us to this place, and for this religious home that we have found, that has found us and welcomed us in. This morning we pray for Joy, who is so happy about being with her family for their annual Wellfleet weekend. And we also hold up Scott McIsaac over the loss of his college friend, Miles Leverett. And we pray also for our brothers and sisters in faith in the Episcopal Church for the loss of their beloved Bishop, Tom Shaw. Let the horizons of our mind include all people, the great family here on earth with us, those who have gone before us and left us to the heritage of their memory and their work, those whose lives will be shaped by what we do or leave undone. May we go forth to the duties of our days with willing hands and honest minds, with faith in the power of good over evil, ready to take our place again in the world of women and men and children, expecting to be forgiven only as we forgive others, working and hoping for that day when the ties of human love shall bind every person into the beloved community. This we ask in the name of all that is sacred. Let us be together in silence for a few moments. Amen. It is often said that the offering is a sacrament in the free church. What we mean by that is that we believe it is a blessing to be able to govern and support our religious community ourselves, to make possible by our generosity everything we dream of, and to live out by our shared values. Every week we lift up the spiritual values of generosity by taking an offering to larger ministries of this church. Our plate then, as it is passed among us, becomes filled with the evidence of that generosity. It is our harvest gathered in every week for what most nourishes us. The ushers will now come forward and among you to receive the gifts of this congregation. The morning offering will be most gratefully received. Hi, Deb. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Join me in the use of dedication. May these gifts be transformed into strength for the faith community, into comfort, food, and shelter for those in need, and may we be transformed by generosity. the teal hymnal, number 1028, Fire of Commitment, 1028.